It's Series 2.3, Contemplative Life. We're going to continue with some ideas that we've learned recently, and now spell out what for Aristotle is the contemplative life. Aristotle thinks that the human function must be some area of reasoning or thinking, and he mentions that there are two areas in us that have something to do with thinking. He thinks that one part of us humans obeys reason. In ancient and medieval thinking, this is called the will. The will is something in us that obeys reasoning and thinking. And there is a part of us that has reasoning and thinking. Our mind, the term we'll use in Philosophy 225, our intellect. And we know that there are many kinds of thinking and reasoning activities. There is the reasoning activity that we do when we make decisions, when we deliberate. That's something that all of us, all the time, must do in the course of life. There's also the thinking activity that experts do. Experts evaluate, observe, and form judgments, form diagnoses. Mechanics, physicians are people who are experts in this kind of thinking activity. And of course, most of us in day-to-day life must actively judge and diagnose as part of our day-to-day activity. And then there are sometimes truths in life that exceed our ability to know. Truths perhaps of a divine nature, or truths that surpass ordinary scientific knowledge. Well, that's what contemplating is, and that's the activity that Aristotle identifies. So let's talk about that. Contemplating is our translation of an ancient Greek word, theoria, sometimes translated as study. So in our folio B, Aristotle distinguishes three kinds of life, or three candidates for the good life: life of gratification, political life, and the life of theoria. And originally in our translation it says study. Study, I think of as a misleading word for us, because that of course means book learning and the work that we're doing at the university. And while it's true that Aristotle valued book learning, unlike Socrates, study is a more broad term for something that we do when we behold a phenomena or an experience that exceeds our understanding. So contemplating, I think, does a better job at bringing out the activity we have in mind. I also want to mention some more background. The term theoria in ancient Greece has some specific uses which give us a hint about what the activity is. Theoria is something we would say of people at the Olympic Games who are spectating, watching the different athletes and sitting back in chairs. A person at the games practices theoria. They practice contemplating. In the same way, in ancient Greece, a person headed to the oracle at Delphi, 100 miles away. They're somebody practicing theoria. There's a specific name, theoriu, or theoria, and that means, I take to mean that as that person is pilgriming, as they're on their way to the oracle, they are practicing this form of thinking, possibly a kind of meditative, patient, humble kind of expectation of some higher truth. So when Sheriffon in the story of Socrates goes to oracle at Delphi, he was practicing contemplation in doing so. Aristotle concludes on page 5 and on page 4 of folio B that contemplating has got to be the human function. His reasoning is the following. Contemplating is our most complex and highest form of thinking. And moreover, contemplating, he asserts, is about truths that are supernatural or divine and amazing and difficult to know. Unlike scientific thinking, observing, judging, well, that's about things in the world around us. Deliberating is about our actions and about our worldly relationships. So contemplating is about amazing truths, and those amazing truths are about beings that are supernatural and divine. So contemplating, concludes Aristotle, must be our human function. On page 5, there's an additional support he gives for his proposal. Contemplating is something we share with the supernatural world. Supernatural beings also contemplate. And so in practicing contemplating, we're being closer to them than to the animals and the plants. Aristotle doesn't tell us how he knows that supernatural beings contemplate, but it's an interesting reason to consider. On page 5 of our folio B is a complete statement about the contemplating life and why he thinks it's the best life. There, Aristotle asserts that contemplating, unlike other activities, is something that we can do continuously. Presumably some effort is needed, but unlike other physical activities and thinking activities, it seems that humans by nature can contemplate without interruption. Similarly, Aristotle asserts that there's a pleasure or delight or joy that accompanies contemplating. We recall the hedonists, they think that everything we do aims at some pleasure. Aristotle says, no, there's some higher purpose, higher aim involved in everything that we do besides pleasure. But pleasure does help complete the activity. It kind of fills it out and makes it something beautiful even. So he thinks there is a pleasure that is associated with the activity of contemplating. And importantly for Aristotle, contemplating is something that humans are equipped to do on their own. In the political world, we need our relationships in order to do well. We need to have the virtues, and of course we need wealth and property and honor. And for Aristotle, that makes the political life vulnerable. It makes something less than a good candidate for happiness. Contemplating, however, he asserts we can do on our own. Of course, we require the supernatural experiences or truths that would inspire our contemplating. And Aristotle also suggests on page 5 that friends are helpful in contemplating. So we can contemplate with other humans, but of course it's the supernatural truths that truly guide and inform us. Aristotle thinks that if we have the virtue of contemplating, then we will contemplate well. What is the virtue? It is wisdom. So a good short statement of what happiness is for Aristotle: it is contemplating wisely for a whole human life. I think a lot more could be said about what contemplating is, and we should ask ourselves, is this something that I do? Do I find myself contemplating? If Aristotle is right, if contemplating is the human function, then all of us by nature can contemplate. And if we have wisdom, then according to Aristotle, we will contemplate well. It's a good idea for us to be able to contrast not only the life of gratification and the political life, but also the political life and the life of contemplation. What are some differences? Aristotle claims that the political life is human through and through. It exercises all of our capacities or powers, our feelings, our will, our thinking. By contrast, the contemplative life exercises our intellect, our highest portion. So Aristotle on page 5 asserts that the contemplative life is like an immortal life. It's the effort to be immortal even here on earth. And that's a good summary statement of why, for him, this is the best candidate for the good life.